Hi all and welcome to the Truth, Honour and Integrity Show. My name's Thomas Williams. Quite a different opening that, full of pomp and ceremony, but it certainly beats God Save the Queen anyway. But the reason I played that, some people like classical music and not all heavy rock, but the end piece, everyone singing in harmony. And wouldn't it be nice if we had all lands in hope and glory? So I hope you enjoyed that. Right, let's get into the show. There'll be no Q&A tonight. We've got a lot to cover, and there's an awful lot of sub-intel tonight, an awful lot, and kind of spills over into the intel stuff that we've covered and things, dot connecting, a lot of op-eds and the usual news and views, but we're going to start with this piece. And the first thing is Randy Allen and I will be doing a show on August the 3rd, which is next Saturday, I think, a week on Saturday. And we'll be covering taxation, the legalities of it, and possibly also delving deeper into the crypto Libra scandal and control system, and also coming up with some solutions, so look forward to that. Now, the piece I did last week of children in adult bodies was so timely in many ways, and further validates the show itself is ahead of the curve, as that trait became also prevalent this week, all too predictable and also unnecessary. But whilst people will not address their own issues, they will continue to play childlike games and fake attacks when the real attacker is themselves manifesting in ways they are unwilling to face up to. Now, those people need way more inner and shadow work. Now, of course, we had this week, and I hope you all enjoyed it, the recent edition of From Russia with Love 6. And it was taken from a document that was sent to me, and I added my own input into it, which was fairly explosive. The staggering depths those clowns have gone to over the last 130 years or so to essentially steal absolutely everything from us all, which kind of appears lost on the anti-CHI groups, but that's what happens when you won't face reality, and they try to drag everyone else down to their sewer-based levels. You know, we have a common enemy, this cult of Ra, Freemasonic, sub-grey race that originated out of the Kalimar in India, along with the reptilian DNA families like the Rothschilds, and they should be the focus. Well, that show was the focus. It was heavily on the Rothschilds and the Freemasons' role in it. Now, there are lots of good people in the Freemasons, and they have no idea of what they're giving their energy away to, or what they're involved. You know, and I would love many of them to walk away from their so-called brotherhood and fraternities, but I'm also aware they are placed under threats of death should they choose to do so in some cases. This is how they roll, all about fear and threats, which is what you're seeing in the mainstream media now, all to do with the pedophile stuff. But Freemasons and Mormons operate the same way. If you are in the circle, you largely stay above the law and get certain privileges not afforded to those outside of it, like higher paid jobs and no-bid contracts. Yes, it all goes on. Threats and intimidation are all part of the package. But that package will backfire on you spectacularly going forward. But isn't it rather odd that the Rothschilds and Zito Masons were involved in all these shenanigans? And yet Hitler was not only attempting to throw the Rothschilds Bank out of Germany, but he also banned the Teutonic Knights and the Freemasons in Germany at the same time. Something is clearly amiss with his story, methinks. But as always, you decide. But like most good things on this planet, it has been corrupted beyond belief by these dark forces operating off-world programs designed to harvest us all, including the clowns, for that matter, and the agents and the minions and trolls and chills. And this is what these people don't get. It's a classic program of attack each other rather than face the real enemy. It is cowardice in its highest form. But I guess our show is hitting too many raw nerves and making clowns and their minions rather uncomfortable at the moment, which I take as a massive compliment to the work I have done and you've all done by listening and understanding it. But jealousy also is a really damaging, low vibrational thinking mindset. It is basically your own mind telling you that you're not good enough, so you turn on and rail at the people you desire to be. It's not a good basis for soul development, that. Now, the From Russia with Love series is having a big effect, and it pleases me a lot. A lot of work has gone into those shows, finding and compiling the various pieces together, adding my own knowledge into the mix in a way that is connecting many dots now. Those dots are making people rather uncomfortable with suddenly making a bigger picture. And it is generating a lot of interest in our group. Most good, some not. Our group continues to grow, unlike some others who are falling faster than a pair of Stormy Daniels knickers, like CNN and other fake news outlets. That will continue to be the case whilst they spout lies. To those that ask questions on the Spreaker chat, that chat is not monitored at all. It's checked later in the week, and so admins cannot get to your questions to deliver them for the shows. All questions can go on the pinned post on Facebook or MeWe or via the email, please. Our apologies for late responses to emails. My time has been much shorter recently with work matters. And to Azara, the answer is yes, I will go on Richard Hoagland's show this coming Sunday. Right, let's get into some news. California we're going to start off with first. Parents in one Californian community are fighting for answers after at least 7 children were diagnosed with cancer in the past 4 years. Now, earlier this year they fought to remove a cell phone tower from a local elementary school campus, and now they're focusing on a chemical in their drinking water supply that's linked to cancer. And Ripon, California is just one of dozens of cities across the country dealing with the possibly harmful chemical. And until we can figure out what is happening in this town, we won't stop, said Kelly Prime, a mother whose son Kyle is one of at least 7 kids in Ripon who have been diagnosed with cancer in recent years. Now, Prime and another mother successfully had the cell phone tower removed and has since shifted focus to the drinking water. And she stated, "My gut tells me that something is here that is causing these issues." Now, Ripon was once home to a Nestle plant, that used trichloroethylene, or TCE, to decaffeinate coffee until the 1970s. Oh my. Decaffeinated. That's like, no, I won't say it. But Nestle discharged the plant's water waste into the city sewers. Go figure. and TCE was recently found in one of the 5 city drinking water wells. Now, the city of Ripon said TCE levels reached 90% of the EPA's maximum allowed drinking water last summer. The well was turned off 4 months later. Now, the city says the water meets all established drinking water standards, and Nestle said that for more than 30 years the company has implemented clean-up and water protection measures to ensure levels do not exceed California standards. Yeah, right, and we believe that. But University of California, San Francisco scientist Veena Singla said that when it comes to chemicals like TCE, there are no safe levels of exposure. Drinking water standards and guidelines that we have now are many decades old, and they don't account for the latest science that shows pregnant women and children are more susceptible to TCE. I have a feeling one day soon into the future people will focus more heavily on what's in the drinking water. As per usual, we look to the skies or project away from us and not what's going in us. It's a big problem. You know, when you consider we're 80% water, 75 to 80% water, and we're adding chemicals to it, that unbalances the whole body. They know it and they use it. The chief executive of a downstate branch of Goodwill Industries has resigned last week following outrage across Illinois over her recent threat to stop paying many of the non-profit's disabled employees, citing expected rising payroll costs due to the pending state minimum wage increase. Funny how they argue from one end to the other. It's the Ouroboros again. Well, you ask for a minimum wage increase, that means we have to sack people. Yeah, we're not falling for that nonsense. Perhaps we need to look at the salaries at the top people as to why people don't have enough at the bottom end. Now, after much backlash on social media, Land of Lincoln Goodwill Industries in Springfield on Wednesday reversed its decision to strip the thrift store workers of their pay, with the President and CEO Sharon Durbin issuing an apology to our constituents, our clients and our faithful donors. Our recent decision regarding the vocational rehab program and the resulting harm it may have caused falls short of living up to our mission, and we apologise for this error in judgment. Apologise after the fact. It's not good enough. Now, she was citing an outpouring of comments regarding plans to no longer pay the workers. As a matter of interest, Ms. Durbin, or Mrs. Durbin, drew a salary of nearly $165,000 a year last year. Had served the local Goodwill for 13 years, and her resignation was effective immediately, according to the agency. So you've got these Goodwill charities, I think there's another piece later on about that, with CEOs earning $165,000. That's not charity work. That's vampirism in anyone's book. Now, a day after he sought to distance himself from a chant of "send her back" by his supporters, President Trump lashed out at the media for its coverage of the episode at his rally that followed his repeated attacks aimed at the 4 minority congressmen, really. In morning tweets on Friday, Trump characterised the coverage of his rally this week in Greenville, North Carolina, as crazed, and complained that the media was totally calm and accepting of what he said were vile and disgusting statements made by the freshman lawmakers. Mainstream media, which has lost all credibility, has either officially or unofficially become part of the radical left Democratic Party, Trump wrote. It is a sick partnership, and so pathetic to watch. I'll have more comment on that later. More trouble in the Gulf. Iran's Revolutionary Guards on Friday said they had captured a British-flagged oil tanker in the Gulf after Britain seized an Iranian vessel previous this month, which raises further tensions along a vital international oil, being the operative word, shipping route. And Britain said it was urgently seeking information about the Stena Impero after the tanker, which had been heading to a port in Saudi Arabia, suddenly changed course after passing through the Strait of Hormuz at the mouth of the Gulf. Now, the Revolutionary Guard said they seized the tanker at the request of Iranian maritime authorities for not following international maritime regulations. More on that later also. Where are we next? Mueller. And some background news as well. A businessman who served as a key witness in Special Counsel Robert Mueller's investigation now faces a charge of child sex trafficking in addition to transporting child pornography. An indictment made public Friday in federal court in Alexandria charges Lebanese-American businessman George Nader, who is 60, with transporting a 14-year-old boy from Europe to Washington, D.C. in February 2000 and engaging in sex acts with him. That was a common theme around that time. There was a lot of backdoors into the White House at the time. That's yet to fully come out also, of the Boys Ring Club inside the White House around 2000. Now, that charge comes on top of child pornography charges that had been levelled against him when he was arrested last month. Now, Nader is an advisor, connect the dots, to Crown Prince Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan of the United Arab Emirates, and also a consultant, to Blackwater founder Eric Prince. Hi, Bubba. Oh my. In January 2018, Special Counsel Robert Mueller's investigators questioned Nader in connection to suspicions that the United Arab Emirates had been involved with President Trump's 2016 campaign. Now, Nader was sentenced in the 1990s for transporting child pornography publications in Virginia. Oh my. And was imprisoned in 2003 for sexually abusing 10 boys in the Czech Republic, and yet goes on to work in Washington. Now, last month, he was arrested and charged with transporting pornography depicting child sexual abuse and also bestiality. But also further back, he was charged in 1985 of receiving from Netherlands films and magazines depicting pre- and post-pubescent boys engaged in sexual acts, and was dismissed due to an invalid search warrant. That's how these people get off. Now, a federal court in Virginia, again, in 1991, gave him a 6-month sentence on a felony charge of transporting from Germany pornographic videotapes of boys about 13 or 14 years old. But prosecutors agreed to put the case under seal, quote, due to the extremely sensitive nature of Mr. Nader's work in the Middle East, unquote. Make of that what you will. In 2003, he was convicted in Prague, Czechoslovakia, for sexually abusing 10 boys, for which he served just 1 year in prison. Now, serious questions remain from this. is how and why was a twice, in fact 3 times convicted sex offender not only allowed to be free, but obtain security clearances high enough to be involved in high-level government. So not only must Nader face jail, but also who gave him the security clearance? What Americans won't understand, I know when I came to America, there is very strict policy on convictions, that should you have in any certain categories, you are barred from even going on vacation to America, never mind living or working there. And sexual crimes is one of them. Heads must roll at the top for this deliberate oversight. Yes, it's fine charging Nader, but who gave him the security clearances is of a greater concern and national security to this country. Wyoming next. You don't cover that much. Oh no, Wyoming, Pennsylvania, sorry, not Wyoming. This defies belief. Literally defies belief. The Wyoming Valley West School District in Pennsylvania this week warned parents that their children could be taken from them and placed into foster care if they failed to pay their outstanding lunch debt. Yes, you heard that right. The letter was sent to about 1,000 parents with unpaid lunch bills and warned that failure to pay for their children's food could lead to dependency hearings and removal of their children from the home. Now, the bills reportedly range from $75 to $450 and total over $20,000. I'm going to repeat that line again. You can be sent to dependency court for neglecting your child's right to food. The result may be your child being taken from your home and placed in foster care, the letter said. Welcome to America, where people struggling to pay for basic items are now threatened with losing their kids. No doubt it's all part of a larger strategy to use the kids for their sick-minded operations of adrenochrome and ritual and sexual abuse. Now, apparently the county rescinded the statement and then said they will take parents to court. And what happens when they go to court? Well, the parents will get fined and subsequently have even less money to pay for the school dinners. The insane logic of their world defies belief. Parents who can't pay for the school dinners, they need help. We're being harvested left, right and centre. They don't need to throw kids in foster homes. It defies belief. Kosovo's Prime Minister Ramush Haradinaj said on Friday he was resigning after being called to the Hague War Crimes Court linked to the Serbian breakaway province's violent independence struggle. Now, according to Langley, writers, the reason for this decision is because of a call I have received from a specialist chamber as a suspect, according to the Kosovo Prime Minister. Now, the specialist chamber was set up in 2015 to try ex-Kosovo Liberation Army guerrillas for alleged atrocities in a war against Serbian forces. Now, Serbia, Russia and a number of other countries have not recognised Kosovo's independence. You're probably going to hear more about that. Iran Revolutionary Guards released footage this week that says it disproves the US claim of shooting down an Iranian drone over the Strait of Hormuz, showing the video was transmitted after the alleged time it was destroyed. Now, the elite military unit published the footage on Friday, and it was aired and commented on live on the state TV channel Press TV. Now, the video appears to depict American warship USS Boxer sailing through the strait in the early hours of July the 19th, according to the timestamp shown. More fun and games. Like I said, we'll have more on Iran later. A little bit of honesty, albeit harsh and sinister. But an Israeli minister this week boasted that his country was the only one that, quote, has been killing Iranians, unquote, after tensions between Britain and Iran rose in the Gulf. Regional Cooperation Minister Tzaki Henegbi comments to public radio with a reference to Israeli strikes in neighbouring Syria against Iranian and Hezbollah military targets. But they came after Iran seized a British flagged tanker on last Friday, which added tensions between Washington and Tehran linked to a 2015 nuclear deal. Regular listeners to THI will know it's got nothing to do with nuclear at all. Again, we'll have more on that. For those of you who are new, Israel sold Iran nuclear weapons back in the 1990s, bundles of them. So the idea that Iran is getting nuclear weapons via their nuclear facilities is utter rubbish. They already have them. Now, Hanejbi accused Iran, Israel's enemy, of seeking to create chaos and harm freedom of navigation, asked if he feared that Israel would not receive the backing of the United States in the case of a conflict with Iran. Hanejbi suggested that Tehran would avoid such a scenario. Israel is the only country in the world that has been killing Iranians for 2 years, he said. We strike the Iranians hundreds of times in Syria. Sometimes we acknowledge it, and sometimes foreign reports reveal it. And he added that the Iranians understand that Israel means business. A lot about Iran tonight. Wonder why. I may have more. Ukrainian president. Country taken hostage by NATO goons, Mossad and others. The new president, Volodymyr Zelensky party, is projected to win a snap parliamentary election, consolidating his political power. Now, partial exit polls suggest that the Servant of the People party, named after the TV show Mr. Zelensky starred in, will have a majority in parliament in the Ukraine. Now, he did win a landslide victory back in April, but has so far been unable to appoint the ministers he wants. I wonder if it's really his decision. Now, he has pledged to implement radical reforms and tackle rampant corruption. And speaking outside of a polling station in Kiev earlier on Sunday, Mr. Zelensky told the BBC Steve Rosenberg that the snap election was maybe more important than the presidential election. Now, the exit polls suggest the second most popular party is the pro-Russian opposition in Platform for Life. However, Mr. Zelensky has ruled out working with it, should he need to form a coalition. We'll have more on that later also. Iranian secret services uncovered a 17-member spy ring working against the country, according to state-affiliated media, and some of the agents have been given capital punishment. All the suspects in question were arrested by Iran's Ministry of Intelligence, and they were working as private contractors. THI members will be familiar with that. In the economic, nuclear, infrastructure, military and cyber areas, where they were collecting classified information, the report said. Now, some of the suspected agents were allegedly recruited by CIA officers while applying for US visas. Now, typically this week, CIA agent Mike Pompeo denied it took place and accused Iran of repeatedly lying. A CIA spokesman accusing others of lying. Too funny. We'll be back shortly. Oh dear. Hi all and welcome back. Sub-Intel next, followed by the Intel. Sub-Intel are hints, indicative, dot connecting and or previous covered confirming pieces. Now the first piece is came up this week was the 2019 Miss World America Michigan winner Cathy Zhu was stripped of her title because of comments she made on social media about Muslim women and also black people, she said. Now, one of the Twitter posts read, "Do you know that the majority of black deaths are caused by other blacks? Fix problems within your own community first before blaming others." That statement is a fact, and it has been highlighted on this show. Well, facts, you see, get you in trouble in the way of other agendas. And the other statement she made, there is a try a hijab on booth at her college campus. And she said, "So you're telling me now that it's just a fashion accessory and not a religious thing? Or are you just trying to get women used to being oppressed under Islam?" Now that was posted on World Hijab Day back in 2018. Again, this is something that's been covered in this show, and again, a fact that it's a pure fact that women in the Middle East, Africa and Asia are being heavily repressed by fake cultures and fake religions. That is fact. And this is another example, and I'm going to keep repeating it because they're going to keep doing it and forcing us into hating on each other, the divide and conquer programs that are being ran by the mainstream media. Now, for those that don't know and wish to shout white racism, Miss Zhu is one of the yellow race, not white, who actually told the truth. And I, for one, welcome it. And many more should try it instead of being falsely offended by everything. That's kindergarten level thinking, and it will help no one. It is a fact that black deaths are caused by black people. That is overwhelmingly in the majority. And women are being oppressed badly. Not only under Islam, but right across the Middle East and the Kalymar region. There is a reason behind it, and From Russia with Love covers it. This is taken from an excellent summary by Tyler Durden of Zero Hedge. And a derivatives book of $49 trillion puts Deutsche Bank in the same league as the bank holding companies of US juggernauts JP Morgan Chase, Citigroup and Goldman Sachs, which logged in at 48 trillion, 47 trillion and 42 trillion respectively. Now this was at the end of 2018, and they are official figures according to the Office of the Controller of the Currency. Imagine what it is now. And what people have to understand is when Lehman went under, clowns had lots of assets, cash flow, bailouts and leverages to dig themselves out of the hole. Now they don't. It's that simple. And I hope you all understand the gravity of this situation and act accordingly. Repo rates in China in this past week went up 1,000% in one day. That's all I'm going to say. Announced today, the US federal government is resuming executing death row inmates after a 16-year hiatus, and the Justice Department announced it today. Attorney General William Barr said in a statement that he had directed the Bureau of Prisons to schedule the execution of 5 inmates. Now, Mr. Barr said that the 5 have been convicted of murders and or rapes of children or the elderly. Now, these executions have been scheduled for December 2019 and January 2020, indicative of policy of future events. Time will tell. More hideous operations exposed. The evidence came out after this particular biological resource centre was shut down, but new court documents this week detail the hidden horrors that investigators found inside, and this is going on in all the biological resource centres, wherever they are. Now, former FBI Assistant Special Agent Mark Swinya testimony says he observed, quote, buckets of heads, arms and legs inside the building off 24th Street and University Drive. This is in Phoenix. Now, Swinya said that he saw a cooler filled with male genitalia, body parts piled on top of each other with no apparent identification to indicate what bodies they came from, and even a torso with the head removed and replaced with a similar head sewn together in a Frankenstein manner. Now, the FBI raided the Phoenix-based body donor facility back in 2014, and quite why it's taken 5 years for details to come forward is beyond me, after the allegations that the company was selling parts of those donated bodies for profit. You're going to hear a lot more of that, which is why it's in. Latest clown out of CNN and New York Times to spout utter drivel is Maggie Haberman. A quick look into her background shows a document was released by WikiLeaks that showed that the Clintons' campaign use of Haberman to place sympathetic stories for the Democrats in the Politico magazine. Haberman, born in New York, born to Jewish parents. Here's another example from the news item. Ukraine leader. Russian? Ukrainian? Zelensky, born January 1978 in Kryvyi Rih, Ukrainian SSR, to Jewish parents. Now, in the news story, it said he wouldn't work with the pro-Russian group. Of course he won't work with the pro-Russian group. He is another stooge, is why. And the Ukrainian people are being led down a dark path like many other of the former regions of Russia, or Rus. Like all the states of the western side of Russia, all of that was Rus. The same applies to southern Russia. Most of the Istan countries, again, was all Rus until the Cohen Khan group took over and led them all a merry dance of lies and death. And Ukraine is the latest country to play divide and conquer games with, following Yugoslavia, Czechoslovakia, etc. But back in 1991 brought unprecedented changes. The fall of Russia. A lot more fell than just Russia and a wall. Because what changed is 15 countries were created just like Israel, out of thin air. Armenia, Azerbaijan, Belarus, Estonia, Georgia, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Latvia, Lithuania, Moldova, Russia, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, and Ukraine and Uzbekistan. All of those are Rus countries and all part of Mother Russia. All broken up into manageable parcels for clans to easy control, plus steal the resources from them. Zelensky is not Ukrainian or Russian. Another person of interest that popped up recently, and I'll give you some background of who she is, Ghislaine Maxwell, and links to Epstein. Now, her father was a famous mogul back in the UK, Robert Maxwell, who was also accused of being a pedophile many years back in the UK. But as with all media moguls and rich elite, it got squashed, a bit like Jimmy Savile, because Scotland Yard didn't have the bollocks to follow it through, is why. Now, Maxwell owned the Mirror Group newspapers. And then there was a mysterious boating accident, quote unquote. Some said suicide, some said murder, and some think he did a runner, as he was under investigation for stealing all the group's pension funds totaling $570 million, which after his death was mainly left to the British government to pay out the missing funds. Another bailout again using the people's money. Now, Ghislaine Maxwell moved to the United States in 1991, just after her father's alleged death. And Maxwell was photographed exiting the continent by luxury aircraft Concorde, which caused outrage amidst the pension scandal that was going back in the UK. Unsurprisingly, she quickly rose to prominence as a New York socialite. That place again. She then had a romantic relationship with the wealthy American financier Jeffrey Epstein back in 1992 and remained closely associated with Epstein for several decades afterwards. In a 2009 deposition, several of Epstein's household employees testified that Maxwell had a central role in both his public and private life, referring to her as Epstein's main girlfriend, who also handled the hiring, supervising and firing of staff starting around 1992. She was also being referred to as the Lady of the House by Epstein's staff, as his aggressive assistant, as she was called. Now, Maxwell had attracted interest in the press for her friendship with Prince Andrew, Duke of York, who attended social functions with her in New York, and Maxwell introduced Epstein to Prince Andrew, and the three often socialised together. Now, in 1995, Epstein renamed one of his companies the Ghislaine Corporation in Palm Beach, Florida, and in the year 2000, Maxwell moved into a 7,000 square foot townhouse less than 10 blocks from Epstein's mansion. Now, this townhome was purchased for $4.95 million by an anonymous limited liability company with an address that matched the office of J. Epstein & Co. Oops. Now, in recent years, Virginia Roberts, Sarah Ransom and Maria Farmer have filed lawsuits against Ghislaine. The first two of sexual procurement were awarded substantial damages against Maxwell. Now, the Maria Farmer case is ongoing and alleges that her and her 15-year-old sister were repeatedly molested by Epstein and also Ghislaine, which was reported to the FBI. Clearly, they ignored it, and again, actions against them who covered it up must also be filed. This could have been nipped in the bud a long time ago, and poor children could have been spared the abuse and whatever else they suffered. Now, Farmer's affidavit also stated that during the same summer, Epstein flew her then 15-year-old sister to his New Mexico property, where he and Maxwell molested her on a massage table. Ghislaine Maxwell, born in the UK, born to a Jewish parent. Father Robert, Jewish, and was also a Mossad agent. Boris Johnson, born in New York, and despite his denial, born to Jewish parents. How else would he have gained a job so far above his pay grade? The answer is the same as America. He pandered to the whims of the Zionists. Let's put somebody else under the spotlight, shall we? Sigal P. Mandelker, an American lawyer and government official who currently serves as Under Secretary of Treasury for Terrorism and Finance, born in Israel to Jewish parents. But significantly, she's a member of the New York City, New York State and American Bar Associations. Why is this important? Because Mandelker is the one pushing Iran sanctions. Connecting the dots now. Two more pieces of sub-intel, and we get into some of the what's going on intel. There's not that much, but there is a piece that I have included in the intel because I think it's important and something of grave concern that has to be implemented if we're going to fix things properly. So now we've had the latest instalment of the Mueller saga, 2.5 years on, and still no mass arrests or actual evidence of all these thousands of indictments, just chatter and more chatter with zero actions of any sort of substance. The country is bankrupt, and all they argue over is who is more corrupt than the other, because that is the reality. And I would say the people deserve better, but the majority are either not interested or just participating in arguing over this circus act called American politics. We have to get smarter. Final sub-intel. 2 Democratic US senators will unveil a bill today to curb climate change by slapping a fee on oil, natural gas and coal and delivering most of the revenues, it is said, to low and middle income Americans. Senator Chris Coons said on Wednesday that he and Senator Dianne Feinstein, oh my, will introduce the Climate Action Rebate Act, which aims to generate $2.5 million in revenues over 10 years, starting in 2020. And it stated it will rebate about 70% of the money to families that make less than $130,000 per year, and use the rest of the energy for infrastructure, job retraining for fossil fuel workers, research and development. And if you believe that steaming pile of bullshittery, you'll believe anything, literally. The real news behind that is they are pushing the Mr. Pelosi backed Green Deal. The Pelosi stand to make millions on that Green Deal. You know, and this is how these clowns work. It will only deliver loads of funds to specific clown entities. And like the Holocaust Museum in New York, it will spend it on themselves and their cronies. Period. Climate change. Well, the nonsense. The Microsoft announcement this week that their NASDAQ platform is now transferring to Excel. I guess their Oracle system turned into bacon and went sizzle sizzle. I wonder why. Now you know. Message to clowns. To those who read the script of the show before it goes live, we have noticed. Just saying. You people underestimate too much, and it will be your downfall. Now, the headline this week from mainstream media was Iran is squirreling away millions, barrels of oil in storage tanks at Chinese ports, avoiding a breach of US sanctions, which is being pushed by Ms. Mandelker on behalf of Israel, while providing its biggest buyer with a ready supply of crude to tap if supply is disrupted or sanctions are lifted. However, Iran has continued to ship large amounts of crude oil to China, where they are placed in bonded storage, according to people familiar with these Chinese ports, who were interviewed, unsurprisingly, by Bloomberg. Yet again, born to and from. Now, the real story behind this is you'll find that this is the Black Dragon and the Kuomintang groups and their theft out of Iran and Iraq that went to China and also to the Bush family-based refinery in Houston, Texas, that has now been blocked. So what they're doing now is they're using propaganda to label Iran and try to convince Trump and others via John Bolton, hello, and Mike Pompeo, hello, that they must attack Iran. Why? So they can all steal the oil again. That's what all this nonsense of Iran's about. Forget nuclear and all the other rubbish, and Iran's shooting down drones and this, that and the other. They've lost control of the oil in that region. That's the key news. Why? Because we stopped them. The Russian submarine that went down mysteriously recently was involved in searching the lost continent for treasures. The area has gained much attention, it seems. Where am I? This could have been in the sub-intel rather than the intel, but I'm going to highlight it in the intel for a reason. In the near future, I suspect it will eventually break a plethora of so-called famous people, and the names will go off the internet and out into the main public arena. Virtually every so-called star of TV, music or stage is involved in it. Every model agency implicated. Politicians, volumes of them in every country. The music industry, large numbers of the top stars from 1960s onwards. It seems all involved in pedophilia. The list will sicken many as their favourite TV stars are outed and implicated. But the reason I wanted to mention it is there's a sinister backdrop to all of this that must not go unnoticed or unrecognised. The roles of certain agencies, namely Mossad and the CIA, along with Tavistock and other so-called institutes. Is it institute or institution? Now, upon investigations and my own sources, those two in particular, Mossad and Langley, are implicated heavily in these what I would largely describe as honeypot exercises. I refuse to believe under normal circumstances this volume of peoples are pedophiles. Under normal circumstances, it doesn't make sense. It just doesn't compute to logic. And what I'm stating is that many of them have undergone MKUltra programming, which is CIA mind control techniques, and then they used Operation Mockingbird, which is a joint CIA and Mossad operation of control of the media to cover it up and honeypot people, many of whom were on drugs, funny enough supplied by the CIA. That will break. This has got added in today, and quite frankly it's a news story. Intel and sub-intel all in one piece, and it could be straight out of the narrative of the From Russia With Love series, pseudo-Russians, Iran and Israel. Now, the leader of the Mujahideen-e-Khalq, MEK for short, is an Iranian exile group, often described by critics as a cult. And it broke today that they had secretly travelled to Israel last week for meetings with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and also the Mossad chief Yossi Cohen. Oh my, those Cohens get around, don't they? Or is it all a coincidence? Maybe not. Rudy Giuliani, a long-time supporter of the group, had apparently been the go-between. Oops. So who are MEK? Described as a quasi-Marxist group. Oh my. That fell foul of the Islamic Republic after the 1979 revolution. Yeah, we all know what revolution means and who was involved in it. And the MEK has been in exile, it's alleged, for most of the last 4 decades. Now, both the US and the European Union used to consider the group as a terrorist organisation. But then we're familiar with Al-Qaeda, and Taliban, which were funded by the same two groups. And a designation against them was lifted just a few years ago after a high-profile lobbying campaign that many alleged well-paid supporters from former CIA chief James Woolsey, Howard Dean, and also Mr. Giuliani again. Now, back in the 2000s, early 2000s, MEK were a source for several major revelations regarding Iran's nuclear weapons program. It all comes round, does it not? And according to a 2017 report, most likely attributable to the Obama administration, Israel had teamed up with the MEK to assassinate Iranian nuclear scientists. So they label them as terrorists, but fund them and use them in operations. And here's the stinger. It was announced that there was a terror plot in Paris, of which there's been numbers recently, that came out of Austria and Belgium last year, and reportedly it was an Iranian terror plot, but was all foiled by Mossad. Let's all clap and cheer Mossad for stopping a terrorist plot. The alleged target in that plot? The MEK rally. Mossad saved the terrorists. It's all there. This final piece of is more than an op-ed, but I'm going to include it in the intel. It's all crossing over now because of the sheer volume of information coming out that cross-references many pieces that we've put out previously in the show. But this is also a solution that will take us into a musical break. Now, I have put out several warnings recently regarding Trump and the US military. And then you see media publishing stories in the past week or so of crimes committed by the US military. For what the first one was the weaponized ticks story, and then the ET stories and the role of the US military had in them. But that wasn't all. Then NATO open source man Robert David Steele chimes in this week and outs the US military and others about military bases being used for child trafficking. All very valid, Mr. Steele, but why now? Well, it's simple. Because you are playing faction games, Mr. Steele. Our faction is better than their faction. No, Mr. Steele. They're all corrupt, murderous, harvesting agents of death, period. And what Steele and the media are doing is they're throwing the US military under the bus, as this show forecasted. And they are attempting to turn the public against the US military now, as they no longer need or want their efforts in global domination. You see how the plot works? It's problem, reaction, solution. They have the solution. They're waiting for the people to react against it. The problem now they have, because all their funds are being cut off, is it costs too much to run 900 plus bases globally. It costs lots of money, billions a day. And it also needs lots of spying or monitoring to keep them all in check. Well, of course, now they have millions of mercenaries, So you don't need bases or military. You just play the migrant card and push them into a country, like what was stated about Crimea in From Russia with Love 6 on Tuesday. It is estimated that there's 1.2 million of militants that are now stationed in Crimea, alongside NATO goons, and they're all ready to attack Russia again, overthrow Putin and install a fake monarch, Maria Romanova. Think about it logically. The US military was pushed into selling all of their equipment, every ship, plane, tanks, rockets, the whole caboodle, to a Chinese consortium, not the government, and have been leasing it back for the last 2 years. That consortium is Rothschilds backed. And the Rothschilds have been looting countries and been building up NATO, private security groups known as contractors, real name mercenaries who'll do absolutely anything for money, whose policies was to use people who have been bombed out of their towns and cities, then give money to those people to go and fight abroad by the same programmed people who bombed them. It's a classic CIA tactic, and that Steele knows all too well, as given he was a private mercenary assassin at one point in South America. His words, not mine. America needs to wake up, and quickly. Russia also. And the plethora of hints in sub-intel in the last 3 or 4 shows, also in desperate, actually not desperate, but dire straits, is China. And I mean dire straits. All 3 countries have been looted heavily and have little in the way of real resources that can be monetized left. I gave a solution around 18 months ago that some people sniffed at, and that's okay. But to me it becomes more necessary by the day. Is it fairly radical? Absolutely. But we live in a very radical and critical times, and it needs strong leadership and a commitment from the people. Otherwise, we are going to collapse in chaos for an undetermined length of time. Now, it won't be 3 days or 2 weeks. So here is my solution. And for those of hard of hearing, by my, I mean I only. What will have to take place in America is we will have to close down all American borders. No one in, no one out for a set time period while operations are being carried out. Cancel all global trade deals, including the stock markets, as this prevents transfers and further looting out of the country whilst the clean-up takes place. Cancel the UN, NATO and any other commissions or think tank groups operating under deceit to the public. Issue executive orders to reassemble the military, police and National Guard under America dictates, and that can all be done under the Emergency War Powers Act, and instruct them to go and arrest all the top-end criminals in one sweep. Send in a task force team to take over all media outlets, throw out the agency script readers and replace with people who will deliver real news and broadcasts approved by the President. with a series of shows detailing what has and what is going on. Remove all corporate and conglomerate advertising off the TV to avoid further lobbying takeover attempts. Allow total access to entrepreneur media outlets not connected to current MSN media projects, and the news to be based on not on propaganda or agency-backed scripts. The police to be brought back under the control of the government, not private security holders like Citadel or Vice. Take over Citadel, Vice, G4S and all other so-called private security groups, as all of them work for the Rothschilds cult. An executive order to cancel operations of all troops fighting abroad, arrange their return and use them to defend America and its borders, or employ them to go after all these dark forces people globally on the condition other countries request help to do so, which is a must. Trust is in short supply. Otherwise it will look like another of the clown invasion tactics again. We have much trust globally to regain, and this would be a start. Restore the organic constitution and delete all the core pirate versions. Restore the Bill of Rights, delete the Patriot Act and restore an American government which we've not had since 1871. Remove all references to the United States. This country is not the US. US is a European power structure created by the dark forces. Go to all AIPAC and other Israel conducive offices, remove all people, all contents, and freeze their bank accounts or sequester those funds for the operations and close them all down. Find out who are the top-end contributors, who they were, and freeze their accounts until investigations are completed. Go into the Federal Reserve building, throw them all out, and take over the operations in connection with the Manor World Holding Trust. The lower-end people working in there can be used for the investigations and ongoing operations within that building. Issue a new American currency backed by the assets contained within the Manor World Holding Trust and our own borders, with no references to the United States, notes or other debt instruments to be placed on the new money. No more 10% costs per dollar, saving the country a massive amount each year. 10% of it costs America 10% of every dollar that comes out of the Federal Reserve. Go into the IRS building, throw out all top CEOs and management and take over their operations, implement the new tax structure already worked on and handed over previously to you to implement. Take all funds collected illegally out of the IRS and give it back to the people in the form of rebates. The new taxes will only go to America, not the Crown or other Rothschilds slush fund accounts. Go into the US Treasury and the AU Treasury plus other shell treasuries and remove all top CEOs and management, take over all operations in connection with the Manor World Holding Trust. Again, the lower end people in there can stay in their jobs and help with the investigations within the building. Eliminating several treasury shell companies will also have a huge savings on government spending. Go into the UN building and close it down until further notice. It can be used to notify the rest of the world of what is going on, with real people talking common sense, not puppets on a string repeating scripted narratives and agendas. The Manor World Holding Trust has 6 seats in the UN Council. Go into Silicon Valley, strip it all down and never allow one consortium to run that type of project with no oversight, which is an actual national security issue, ever again, and deal with the clowns connected to the CIA and NSA in that industry. Close down Google and Microsoft, two giant clown conglomerates that has cheated, lied, spied and looted this country beyond all reason. We have other solutions to not require either of them, and they are ready to roll out also. The last two items will create more jobs and eliminate flagrant national security issues. Cancel all foreign aid, all grants to charities until they clean up their act also. All of them are vulture capitalists, harvesting funds off people under false pretences. The lower end people who work in those charities can carry on doing the real work within those organisations of helping people and animals. Currently, they are helping only themselves at the top end. How can you say you are a charity worker and claim $300,000 to $1 million a year in paychecks? No, you're just self-serving, greedy bastards. That is your correct term, not charity worker. This will save huge amounts of funds that can be used elsewhere for better purposes. Go into the FBI, CIA, DHS and NSA and rout out anti-American and anti-life peoples. Scale down agencies, as most are only spying on the American public. The NSA can be eliminated entirely, as it's just a sub-office of the GCHQ and Crown operations. The staff not immersed in clown operations can be diverted into many new jobs investigating each department for misappropriation and clown operations. This will save huge amounts of wasted public funds. Create a task force and go into every so-called research centre and assess all projects and experiments going on in those facilities. Remove clowns weaponising anything against the public. All research in the future must be for the benefit of all people, living beings, plant life and the planet only. Eliminate permanently the rest. This again will save huge amounts of wasted public funds. We must quickly set up manufacturing and agriculture with the goal of the country becoming self-sustaining with no imports forthcoming due to the cancelled trade deals. We have much of that ready to roll out. As other countries follow suit of cleaning out all of their filth, we can reintroduce trade deals, travel, currency exchanges and partnerships with those countries as appropriate. So where will the funds come from? Well, the country itself will have massive savings with no Federal Reserve, and also the announcement of the elimination of their alleged debt. It's all being paid. So no fake interest payments per day going out every day will make a start. Great savings will be made on government spending as each department is overhauled using the staff within those organisations. There has already been made massive savings in government spending due to the blocking of over half the funds going out the Pentagon back door. Finally, the Trust has stated it will fund this country until it becomes self-sufficient, which is estimated to be 3 to 5 years. We have the assets, we have the wherewithal to change this country and subsequently the world towards a better path. The question remains, are you? Hi all and welcome back. Are they wise enough? They best be, because they're all going to get replaced otherwise. Right, let's get into some op-ed pieces. I was asked last week, and it came up in the chat, about we were kind of, well, it's over halfway, almost 2/3 of the way through, or rapidly heading towards 2/3 of the way through the year, to do a quick review of the positions that were made at the end of last year. And is it confirming? Has it unfolded? So this next piece is on that. So here's what I said on the end of the fourth part of the 2018 year review. I think 2019 might need about 7 or 8 parts, but there you go. So, as stated, what can we expect in 2019? And the words for 2019 was consolidation and validation, aligned with a steady but increase in awareness, progress, consciousness and vision, the latter of which will come in a variety of ways as the year unfolds. Vision. With many of the masks visible and those now gone or eroding, our progress will increase again next year with less obstacles to overcome, as many were removed in the past year. The split of the two worlds will increase rapidly next year. Partnerships will again be under pressure of those in relationships who are not frequency balanced. Ear buzzing will increase. Your own awareness will increase. You will become more in tune with yourself, environment and nature. I suspect time will make less sense next year. Glitches will increase as more is phased in and other parts phased out. Dreams will get more vivid and more understandable if you take note of them. January could well be testing on a financial and global levels for us all. February and May could well be interesting months, and late November could be extraordinary should the full year loop news continue. His story will unravel much in 2019 as more people start to question our real history. I expect some more discoveries to be made next year as the drip-fed disclosure rises again. An understanding will develop more over this statement made. Fact is fiction and fiction is fact. The trust will continue to erode all the former control system with a mixture of teaching, knowledge and hammers, and we are hoping for a full breakthrough next year in terms of the funding and the start of the changes in preparation for the new decade. Oh, I think a lot of you, I can't see the chat in the moment, would go along with large parts of that. Fact is fiction, fiction is fact. His story will unravel more. Ear buzzing increasing, your awareness increasing, coming more in tune with yourself. The split of the two worlds will increase rapidly this year. I think people have noticed that. Partnerships will again be under pressure of those in relationships who are not frequency balanced. Masks fallen. Consolidation. We have consolidated, and probably more so this year than in any other year. We've had more validation of what has been put out, which is why we have the sub-intel. Another thing that needs to be noted again, as we have lots of new members now, I know some won't like me referencing it again, but I'm going to say it anyway because it's important, is how the clown programmers love their cats and cat references. So it should come as no surprise this week that the mainstream media created much fanfare of their latest two movies to highlight and program people: the Lion King remake and the remake of the show Cats, which has caused quite a kerfuffle on the internet. But there was well, to me it was anyway, rather amusing other cat news last week. A Catholic priest spouting shite, saying fat people won't make the cut. Gonna be that nasty people and that divisive. You deserve all you get. Now, some people don't believe this is a program. Type any word into MeWe or the Facebook GIF box and see how many cats come up in every selection. This is not some random coincidence. Oh no. It is programming and the worship of Ra. Just like the advert for cheaper drugs, RX. RX is the symbol of Ra. Now, no one, least of all me, is saying don't love your pets. What I'm making you aware of is a deep-seated problematic program that involves past life traumas, and it is loop reprogramming in essence. This is what I'm trying to get at. And what they're trying to do is throwing you into the past when we wish to go to the future. Now, in light of Trump repeatedly complaining about biased coverage, he's done it again this week several times, and fake news, is it not time it was addressed, Mr. Trump, once and for all? We have solutions to fix that, Mr. Trump, and you know it. Solution one would be for you to sue them for slander. It's all fairly obvious, it's all covered. You can pick several items on several days on several channels that are deliberately spouting lies or twisting words. You know their funds are dwindling and lawsuits will shut them down. Number two, you could find loopholes in the 1934 Telecommunications Act. I found several in scanning that document recently. Number three, declare them as a terrorist organisation, which essentially they are under the Patriot Act, and remove their licences. 4, ban them from all rallies and speeches. Don't need them. And 5, it's up to the people to create a nationwide movement and never watch their channels again. Now, I'm sure there will be a backlash to that, as clown operators behind the scenes will shout dictator, fascist, Nazi if he does that. Oh wait, they already do that now. So there'll be no backlash to it. Those clowns need to be shut up permanently. Americans who wish to find out the depth of deceit in the White House and learn how a drunk became the vice president and then took advantage of an imbecilic, drunk and cokehead president who was placed there due to his father and CIA connections to take over the role of president, need look no further than the movie Vice that came out last year. V-I-C-E. What you will find is just staggering and sickening in equal measure. But the question to ponder is, if America is the greatest at everything, why is there a meme or need to make America great again? Next piece, short one. When a man has penetration sex with a woman without her consent, that's called rape, as we all know. But did you know that if a woman makes a man have penetration sex with her without his consent, it's not classed as rape under the law of England and Wales? Which means it's in the bar law, which means it's in America also. Next piece. The next two are kind of tied together. It's highlighting the same problem and the usual issues of division and misdirect of truth. Because society is led to believe that racism is a white-only problem, despite numerous evidences to the contrary. And one of the largest proponents of crying racism against them is the Zionist Jewish people with anti-Semitism. And yet we rarely hear of the racism within their own community until this story broke, which conveniently was left out of the media. No surprise, same people run it is why. But violent riots erupted in towns and cities throughout Israel in the past month that peaked on July the 2nd. Like I said, something that was clearly kept out of the Zionist-run media. Cars were set alight, property vandalised, scores of police were injured, and demonstrators arrested. Hundreds of thousands of motorists were stranded for hours on a gridlocked highways and secondary roads in the heat without water or warning, and the protesters, predominantly members of the Ethiopian Israeli community and their supporters, took to the streets to express their rage at what they condemn as systemic police brutality targeting their community. Oops. Ethiopian Israelis. Why Ethiopian Israelis? Because that's the location of the fourth and final Garden of Eden, is why. Now, numbering approximately 150,000 in population of just under 9 million, Ethiopian Israelis are black, and their leadership is saying that this is rank racism. And what sparked the latest round of protests was the death of a 19-year-old Solomon Tika on June the 30th. Tika was allegedly hanging around with some friends and reportedly beaten up on a younger boy, according to the media. And an off-duty policeman just happened to be passing by with his family and intervened. And he claims that Tika and his friends attacked him and he feared for his life. So he drew his gun and aimed a warning shot at the ground, whereby it miraculously ricocheted and hit Tika in the chest, killing him instantly. Now, there's different version of events to what transpired that night, that Tika was actually shot intentionally and directly, no ricochets. And the Minister of Public Security, Gilad Erdan, during questions earlier this week, the Minister made what, quite frankly, is a remarkable statement in a public ceremony, where he said, quote, "I've met with dozens of Ethiopian Israelis who spoke about encounters with police. They didn't invent their stories and didn't coordinate them. Racism is a problem for all of Israeli society," unquote. You see, pot and kettle springs to mind here, and a case of Why don't you get your own house in order before pointing fingers at others? And this is what I keep warning the Jewish people. These Zionist clowns care not one iota for any of you. None whatsoever. And they've used you as guinea pigs to expand their area of control and then discard you like the Palestinians. And I'm hoping the Israeli people en masse fight back against these goons. Palestinian people are not your problem. The Zionist system is. Whilst that was going on, we got this story in. And the latest atrocities coming out of the cult of Ra, new zone of sacrifice and death, now known as Israel, reveals an ongoing issue of repression, replacement and deletion, which is all too common throughout my series From Russia with Love. Now, the Palestinians built homes, and years later Israel built a wall. And now they're telling them those homes must be demolished because they are too close to the wall. And according to the Israeli Committee Against Home Demolitions, since 1967, when the occupation began in East Jerusalem, the West Bank and Gaza, nearly 50,000 Palestinian homes and structures have been demolished. 50,000 homes. Displacing hundreds of thousands of Palestinians and affecting the livelihoods of thousands of others. And when you combine this with the 600 Palestinian villages that were demolished when the State of Israel was established, creating 750,000 Palestinian refugees, which was 3/4 of the population, and its ongoing demolition policy within the State of Israel itself, the actual figure exceeds more than 100,000 Palestinian homes demolished since 1948. 100,000 homes. Now, it's said by official figures that that is a conservative figure, because multiple level homes and apartment blocks count as one unit, and does not include the number of self-demolitions, which is a growing phenomenon done because Israel issues a bill for the demolitions which many Palestinians cannot afford to pay. So not only do they threaten you to demolish your home, they charge you as well. Who are they? Well, no, they're not people. Let's put it bluntly. And the world needs to wake up to these goons. Now, Palestinian homes are demolished for various and sundry reasons, and the land they own has been declared by Israel agricultural land or open green space. And they have no building permits, which the Israeli authorities refuse to grant to the Palestinians. The slope of their land is adjudged as too steep. Their houses are too near settlements or Israeli-only highways. Like, that's not racism in and of itself. Israeli-only highways. Despite the fact that the houses were there first, or out of collective punishment for some action the punished people had nothing to do with. The clearing of vast tracts of land for military security purposes, the destruction for the sake of expanding roads, settlements and the separation barrier, houses cleared to make passage safe for settlers or other security purposes, homes representing collateral damage and more. They are the list of excuses to knock down the homes. Now, what has gone on recently is 16 apartment buildings, home to more than 100 Palestinian families, will have their homes destroyed by Israeli authorities in Jerusalem after a ruling last Sunday by the Israeli Supreme Court following the demolition. The High Court accepted the argument of the Israeli government that the homes were, quote, too close to the Israeli security wall, unquote, negating the fact that these homes were constructed on Palestinian land and were permitted by the Palestinian Authority, and the fact that the wall was constructed on Palestinian land with no consultation with the Palestinian Authority as to its route. Meanwhile, the world sits there and shits their collective pants and says nothing of these atrocities. Nothing. American presidents and Congress all bend over and proverbially take it up the arse every time Israel says jump. They all ask, how high? And bend to every whim, where it has now become, in some areas of America, a criminal offence to criticise or question Israel. Do people in America not ask, what happened to free speech and the First Amendment? Just why is this one tiny region holding and wielding such power? And just why are we sending these death cult merchants $3 billion of our money in aid every single year for them to destroy other people's lives? And why are we, USA, vetoing every single bill and resolution in the UN for war crimes labelled at this tiny state cult camp? Just why? Hi all, and welcome back. Right, where are we going to next? A few hammers gone out so far, and we have more to come. The stock market. I thought I'd highlight that for a bit before we go to some history on Syria and a few other things that need to be covered. Global warming, Nibiru, and bloodlines, and what is life, all coming up, still to go. The stock market, which personally I would shut down altogether. I think if we're going to fix our country, we have to shut it down, as those clowns are looting all kinds of money, as you'll find out in this piece. And for more than a decade now, the stock market has surged, and since the recession low of March 9th, 2009, the SP 500 has rocketed from 666 to 3,000 this week. That's a 350% gain in 10 years. Talk about wealth building. Except the bad news. Despite this incredible period of wealth creation, it has bypassed tens of millions of older Americans, perhaps including you. The reason that is because the wealthiest 10% of households owns 84% of all the stocks. And that includes pension plans, 401k accounts, and the IRA's accounts, as well as trust funds, mutual funds, college saving programs like the 529 plans. That means that 90% of American households only own the remaining 16% of stock. And these stats come from Edward Wolf, who's an economist at New York University, who stated this week, for the vast majority of Americans, fluctuations in the stock market have relatively little effect on their wealth, well-being, or that matter, their well-being. No shit, Sherlock. Why? Well, it's not designed for ordinary people, is why. Only the greed merchants and the vultures who pick over the carcass. That's what it's all about. We are the carcass in big capital letters, because we're all dead, you see. Recently, there's been a lot of, a full-scale bombing of war on Syria. But did you know that the attacks on Syria have been ongoing at regular intervals through time? This is not the first rodeo, far from it. Several of them, particularly over the last 1,000 years. And we're going to look at one in particular. Yet again, the same people crop up and the same problems. The Aleppo massacre, often referred to simply as the events, was a riot perpetrated by Muslim residents of Aleppo, although ethnic non-Alepian groups including Bedouins, Kurds and Turkmen have also been blamed for the riot, especially by local historians, largely from the eastern quarters of the city against Christian residents. Some may already be connecting dots. Largely located in the northern suburbs of Judeid and Salabay. Now, the rioting began in October 17, 1850 and ended 2 days later, and the riots resulted in numerous deaths, including that of the Syriac Catholic Patriarch, you're going to love this one's name, Peter the Seventh Yahweh. You can't make this stuff up. And ethnic non-Alepian groups, including Bedouins, Kurds and Turkmen, like I said, were also blamed for the riots. And it's been argued, however, that the events reflect instead more complex social dynamics, particularly the disruption caused by the sweeping reforms that were implemented by the Ottoman Empire in the 19th century attempts at modernization, which was known as the Tanzimat, and by the Ottoman Empire's incorporation into the modern world economic system. You're going to start getting it shortly. As the Ottoman Empire weakened in the 19th century, restrictions on Christians were eased due to the increasing intervention and influence of European powers. Also, they said, that's not quite correct based on this narrative. The reforms emerged from the minds of reformist sultans like Mahmud II, his son Abdul Majid I, and prominent, often European-educated bureaucrats. Is the key answer, who recognised that the old religious and military institutions no longer met the needs of the empire, and part of the reform policy was an economic policy based on the Treaty of Balta Liman in 1938. Which two entities delivered that treaty? The Ottoman Empire and the United Kingdom. And their plan was to integrate the houses again under the Edict of Gulhain. Gulhain means Rose House, House of Rose, Rose Line, Freemasonry and Templar stuff again. Now at the end of that, after that treaty was signed, it brought in the first ever banknotes into Syria, the first post office, which was the monetary banks back then, banking reform and also legal reform, and also the first ever taxation and paid tax collectors. So essentially what happened, it became crown led. in essence. Now, the Armenians and Melkites were officially recognised as millets in 1831 and 1848 respectively, and 1839 reforms allowed Christians to build new churches, which was previously prohibited. Setting the stage, problem, reaction, solution. Then a newly formed municipal advisory council provided Christians with the opportunity to express their opinions. And perhaps the most significant changes during the time, however, were the alterations being made to the Ottoman taxation system. Of course, Muslims didn't have it, they didn't have usury. Traditionally, direct taxation was only required for adults, non-Muslim males, through a system known as jizya. Now, jizya, Jizya, has two meanings, which is eerily similar to the US income taxes. It means tax, but it also means a tribute or compensation. Crown terminology again. For those who are new to the show, your income tax is not a tax, it is a tribute to the Crown, which is not the Queen of England and is Rothschilds. Taxes for Muslims, rather than being applied to the individual, were instead announced by the government and left to be collected by the various corporate entities, such as guilds or quarters, from among their individual members. And yet an individual head tax was introduced for Muslim residents during the Egyptian occupation of Syria in the 1830s. It's the same cult people coming in again. Under Muhammad al-Pasha, and was continued even after the Ottomans regained control of the region. Now, not only did this lead to increasing economic burdens upon the Muslim residents of Aleppo, spurring on dramatic decreases in their relative wealth, in other words, they're being harvested, while their Christian neighbours prospered because of connections with Europe. But it also created a sense of disillusionment in terms of the relationships between Muslims and the Ottoman state, for it undermined the distinction between Muslims and non-Muslims, thereby possibly calling into question the role of Muslims as the defender of Islam. The already apparent class distinction became more dramatic with Muhammad al-Pasha's modernisation efforts and led to the increasing social discontinuity that then set the stage for conflict between the Muslim and Christian communities. You see, the Albert Pike prophecy was not just the future, but also the past. They've been playing the same game over and over again. These taxation reforms were coupled with an economic depression, go figure, that spread throughout Aleppo in the mid-1800s and were thus particularly devastating for residents of the eastern quarters of the city, for they were largely engaged in the caravan trade and the grain trade, the two sectors most deeply affected by the economic depression. All sounds very American, doesn't it? As trade with Europe increased, well, I never. Merchants who were mostly Christians and Jews prospered, well, I never again. While Muslim residents faced increasing economic hardships, and the Muslim population of the city was badly hit by inflation. Inflation, for those new, means tax. It's a secret tax, as a result of the foreign merchandise that flooded the market after Syria was integrated into the world economy. Again, this is what they've been doing with the EU. Adding countries into it, they just suck all the wealth out and then dump them all in and wait till they all collapse, and then they buy up all the assets for nothing. Now, the ease of commercial restrictions upon Christians spurred on discontent amongst the Muslims. Problem, reaction, solution. They perceived this to be a threat to their traditional economic advantages in the region. Muslims also sought to stop the building of new churches without much success, and additionally Aleppo had a large Janissary faction which had been growing increasingly discontented with the Ottoman government since its abolishment in 1826. Now, the Janissaries largely resided in the eastern quarters of Aleppo and were thus particularly affected by the economic hardships. When the Greek, no surprise, Catholic Patriarch Maximus III Mazloum was carried on a procession through the city with much extravagance. Yet again, they're throwing it in people's faces. And Muslims saw this as a sign of increasing Christian domination of their city, and a celebratory fire during the festivities, sacrifice, gave rise to rumours that Christians were arming themselves. General reforms occurring within the Ottoman Empire as it attempted to modernise, specifically census taking, and the forced conscription of citizens also led to increased tensions and feelings of insecurity for the Muslim residents of Aleppo. Now, following the first ever census of Aleppo's adult males, rumours spread that the Ottoman Empire intended to begin to conscript adult males in the area, and backlash against looming threats of conscription then meant that the taking of the census became the catalyst for the 1850 riots in Aleppo. And as you can see, all the world is a stage, and his story always repeats. It's the same thing of what happened in Europe. Then they go back and loot the Middle East. It's what's happened in America. They create division amongst the people by doing deliberate policies that cause it, and the stupid people fall for it every single time. I hope this time we get clever and recognise it's not the people that are being put up as the enemy that's the problem. It's the one who made the policy that's the problem. Same applies in the UK and Europe. They complain about Muslims being in their country, and yet don't ask, why are they going in their country? Because they're being bombed out of their own homes is why. And pushed into regions to cause the very chaos that they will provide the solution for. Couple of word magics. The Ministry of Defence. Anyone ever looked at that word? Ministry of Defence. Isn't a ministry church? Are they church defenders? And then you look at the term infantry. Child soldiers, that means. And one of the members mentioned this week about the songs about it in America, the little drummer boys who marched before the troops, all banging away at drums and tunes. Why? Because they were the first line of defence. They were the first to be shot. You see, child sacrificing has gone on a long, long time. Another thing to ponder on was Aryan, known as Aryan, originally Yan. Has it been lost in translation? Means original. Yan is an optimal state of mind for higher initiates. Something to get you pondering on. Global warming. This is a short piece that will take us into another music break. And then we're going to get into some interesting pieces. More interesting anyway. Now, with debate raging globally over climate change and global warming, when the world was told by the Russians in the late 1950s we were potentially going into a global cooling period, not warming, which could explain some of the chemtrailing that's been going on in our skies over the last few decades. You create a level, you can heat the atmosphere up and prevent some of the cooling, is the theory behind that. But perhaps one thing has been overlooked, which is kind of typical in my opinion, whereby one social engineering program then has wider impacts on other parts of life. And it's typical of the Ouroboros practice of the clowns. They put up one thing and it ends up swallowing itself with another program. And that social engineering program was designed to cram as many people into towns and cities as possible, with the object of then being able to control them easier. It was also easier to mind control them as well, and bombard them with negative frequencies into that zone and then create more issues. And this also had another aspect, as if you cramp people's space, conflict arising from it is never far away, and all part of their other program of divide and conquer. There is a reason why these high rollers live far away from cities and the masses, generally in massive grounds, and neighbours are far away, as they are not bombarded with these negative frequencies from the masses. It's not just towers that does it, it's people as well. That's what people don't understand. Negative people creates a negative environment. And the main impact of this is building high-rise buildings, which generate way more heat. So if you're worried about global warming, there's your answer. And it's labelled as an urban heat island, is a metropolitan area that is significantly warmer than its surroundings. And according to the EPA, the annual mean air temperature of a city with 1 million people or more can be between 2 and 5.5 degrees Fahrenheit warmer than the surrounding areas. What are they always talking about? Of being 2 degrees more. Well, there's a heat rise of 2 to 5.5 degrees. Now in the evening the difference can be as much as 22 degrees, as rural areas quickly cool down after sunset while cities maintain the heat. So what is causing it? Concrete. This absorbs the heat way more and makes the city hotter. And then when you add in several high-rise buildings with glass, and that heat is reflected and magnified several times. They had problems in London. They built a building the wrong way, and the sun hitting the glass was buckling cars on the ground because it was reflecting, just buckling cars to bits. Well, imagine what it's doing to people. These clowns don't tell you this, do they? Oh no. And the solution is we have to move away from high-rise buildings and condensed cities and towns, and preferably away from water. Yes, it's nice to live on the ocean, and yes, it's nice to live on the river, but it's not much fun when a tsunami rolls in, or a hurricane rolls in, or a flooding rolls in. It's just not, as many thousands of American people have found out this year. And both can contribute to retaining heat, which becomes unbearable in certain regions during the summer. Look at Manhattan, a sea of crude, ugly, high-rise buildings that's generating massive heat, all while playing the dick swinging contest of my building is bigger than yours, all built for using the same money people who are pushing the climate change narrative. You see, the Ouroboros again. So if we want to cool down the core planet temperature, the very clowns who sit on think tank committees to discuss the problems are or were the very ones who created it. And it's up to them to fix the causes that they created first, not pass it on to the public. We never built or asked for concrete jungles. You did. Welcome to the jungle indeed, the concrete jungle. If we want to fix global warming, we have to fix that. It's not good. It heats everything up and it stifles plant life. We have the technology and the wherewithal to not require those type of buildings. We have technology to not require buildings littered with mould, called hempcrete. Oops. Look into it. Right, these next two pieces before we have another musical break, before I do the final roundup tonight, is a warning of what happens when things go catastrophically wrong and you don't deal with the problems. This was not on our world. This was on their world. He studied why the volcanoes weren't belching the much needed atmospheric gases and thus not releasing any warmth. Things were getting worse. Nibiru's problems was to be solved by getting gold to repair the atmosphere and or to blast the volcanoes with nuclear weapons, or he could decide to do nothing. Let with weapons of terror the bowels of Nibiru be cut open. Let volcanoes again erupt. He then commanded with weapons of terror skyborne chariots were armed with terror missiles from the sky where volcanoes struck. The mountains swayed, the valleys shuddered as a great brilliances with thunder exploded. That was taken from the Nibiru Anunnaki tablets of life on their planet. But it can also tell us much about our own planet. One, it was they who introduced nuclear weapons here. They who used it on their own planet to try and wake dormant volcanoes. And it seems by this that it is the volcanoes that create a planet's atmosphere, which then creates the rain. And what one can deduce from that is, as I have covered in previous shows, the northern and southern lights are not coming from the sky sun, but the central sun in the middle of a planet. As above, so below. which heats up the inner core and drives the volcano fires. Nobody asks where the heat for the volcanoes comes from. That's deliberate. And this must have been failing on the Nibiru planet for whatever reason, and so the cycle of life started to die off. The planet begins to shrink and shrivel up due to no expansion of the hardened rock that came out of the volcano. If a planet shrinks, it then becomes a hollowed out planetoid. It subsequently resembles a moon. Is it possible our moon was Nibiru after all? Now, our current moon is too large to be a natural moon. It's just too big. And it is, as a course of nature, cannot be fixed in a fixed stationary orbit with only one side shown. Under the laws of nature, that is not possible. Which means it is a fixed satellite station only facing one way. It's a bit like cable TV channels. They don't swirl around and point out into space. Although heaven forbid ET's wanting to watch some of the shite that's on our TVs. It's fixed directly onto the planet. Exactly the same way as the moon. And that is why it was placed there. It never crashed into the earth like the scientists are now trying to tell us and created out of the debris. Because if that was the case, then the question is, why are the moon rock samples older than the Earth? Oops. Now, the Nibiruans came here for the monatomic gold to reseed their planet's atmosphere. But could it be the case that they mined too much gold on their own planet? Given that gold is a planet's ballast. They mined too much, which then sent Nibiru on its elongated orbit. And perhaps there's a reason why many of our volcanoes are going off now and why I warned to stay off mountains recently. Expansion. Next piece. Du-uru. Du.uru. Meaning in the dwelling place fashioned. First son of Enshar and a concubine. The double seed is broken. Married Da-uru, meaning she who is by my side, and he married for love, not by blood relation. The bloodline is broken, they cried. They and many others were now infertile due to Nibiru's enduring hardships. They found a son at the gate and adopted him as their heir. All royal bloodlines of Nibiru are now broken. Seeing the pattern? This, like the nuclear weapons, was replicated on Earth by certain reptilian DNA families like the Rothschildians. All about the bloodline and keeping it in the family, which is not a saying, but literal with those clowns. They were marrying mothers, brothers, sisters and half-brothers and sisters as long as the family line was kept. And this was prevalent in the quote-unquote Egyptian eras also. Why? Because at that time, it was the time of the fake gods and humans living on the planet together. We were treated as their slaves, as their incestuous bloodline was deemed more important than ours. But over time, that policy fails. It corrupts the DNA of interfamily relations, it erodes the family tree, and suddenly offspring are no longer produced by the females. That's what went on in Nibiru. That's what went on in Egypt, cult of Ra. Then they introduced concubines, as they're called, more commonly known as prostitutes, to bear children, preferably a son as an heir to the line of the throne. Of course, the Chinese operate the same issue. One child only, and they only wanted a male. So millions of female children in China over the last 100 years have been slaughtered. Same people is why. Or non-people. This then led to family feuds, which still plays out today in faction wars of who is the natural firstborn and a line back to the king. And this is how Anu got to be king, when the real king was Alulu, not Anu. Alulu then fled Nibiru and came to Earth looking for gold to save their planet and hoping to return back home as a hero and claim kingship again. And this is likely the reason for the story of the fake gods mating with women and how that came about. It was seeding their genetics into another race or species, which then gave them the rights in their eyes over that species and continued their family line that was now corrupted. And this is what the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers and all the royal family lines have all done going back to Egypt and the cult of Ra. Women are not chosen based on love, but their ability to produce children. All royal males globally now sleep with a succession of various coloured females from around the world to bear children, and then they are given privileged upbringing and then suddenly turn up in one of the top positions around the world. Obama and Bill Clinton springs to mind of examples of that policy. These so-called top families are following another off-world program. They are not based in love, only in keeping control and power. They envy us immensely, as so many go about their lives based in love, of which they can't obtain. To them, love is a weakness to be exploited, a desire and a feeling that has to be buried. But without it, you are left a shriveled, withered down version of you, left in a shell with little life force. Which brings me back full circle, as that is how their planet failed, is it not? Hi all, and yes indeed, what the world needs now is love. Something you can't buy, a bit like health really, and time. So this last piece, it's going to finish up tonight's show, is what is life? Well, currently most of life is pure drivel, meaningless chatter, endless examples of children in adult bodies, low vibrational mindsets that focus all the attention away from the self, because that person will not face or accept their own inner failings or who and what they are. They seek solace in the 6 hooks of life that drag them down further into the mire of drugs, alcohol, sex, religion, financial are the main 5, and ego imbalance is the other one. And all are common examples and common failings of man. All of the above 5 except egos are vehicles outside of themselves, of which you are not the driver. Somebody else has hijacked your vehicle and is running it for you. That is mental and physical slavery in its crudest form, from which you can be manipulated just like a puppet on a string. Those with those 5 main hooks will never attain higher learning, divine essence, soul development, and will be left in with the mire of low vibrational astral type entities playing the harvest or be harvested game. And this is what's playing out globally now. You're all seeing it. It's the divide and conquer, dog eat dog, dick swinging, fighting for hierarchical status, wealth, fame and greed. And all are examples of low vibrational soul development entities. And sadly, society is awash with it. The 5 hooks are for those seeking a giant pacifier to soothe them through life. Like a child in a stroller waiting for a parent to pat them on the head and say everything's okay. But it's not, is it? And deep inside those individuals who partake in those hooks to excess know it all too well. Their intuition screaming like a child waiting for their mother's breast milk, but they ignore the intuition because they are not the driver of the vessel. And they then launch into a tirade against anyone that approaches their sphere of influence. And it's called the projection game. Ego starts within, and if contained within, works in accordance with higher learning. But some project it out, all about being important, when doing important has far more value. The fame game, which has seduced quite a few alt media personalities, copying the insidious mainstream media game, is a path of rank misunderstanding of what it means to be alternative, media or otherwise. Too many focus on numbers of how many likes they get to base their popularity. That is ego. Someone with balanced ego cares not for numbers or likes, but what is the actual impact of what you're getting across or trying to relay? Has it made changes? Why do you think our governments are corrupt, morally bankrupt, deceivers, cheats and conniving? Do you think that they're all in some way separate from us? That they're different? In some aspects that can be the case. But in overview aspects, they are a representation of we the people. They are us in overview. Micro to macro. High society is a representation of low society. It's symbiotic in nature, as above, so below. Now, this may disturb some people and cause them to react to that statement, but in overview and balance, you will find it to be more of the truth than you were prepared to accept or handle. Our government is a truer gauge and reflection of our own society than most people are willing to admit, because it's easier to point fingers at people on a screen and project at the projection than deal with or face up to problems within their own circle, family or community. This behaviour, again, in an overview aspect, borders on total stupidity. Our worldviews, opinions, culture, partnerships, friendships are mainly based on interactions with a projection screen, be that a television, mobile phone or computer monitor. And then some end up having confrontations with projections via a projection screen. Ponder on that for a second. Snap reactionary judgments are made based too often on one comment or one projection, and we've all been guilty of it, myself included at times, which is why I prefer to let them hang themselves method. It allows you to step back from their low vibrational thinking and not immerse yourself in their field of inner chaos. Inner chaos is at the root of all issues. Engaging those people leads you to taking on their inner chaos and manifesting it into your life. This is classic energy vampirism, all created in the harvest or to be harvested system. And the only way it'll go away is if you fix you. The ripple in the pond effect. Some will argue that it will have no effect because it's only one ripple. I will argue you don't understand or comprehend your own power. But what about the other 7 billion people? What about them? My response again is, since when is it your responsibility to fix them? Why should another person put more effort into saving people towards those who don't wish to save themselves? That is vampirism again. You help people who have the desire and wish to help others. Waiting for the others to help us when they won't even help themselves is pure folly, and ultimately a distraction. Everything that surrounds us, from people, the materialistic aspect, governmental, financial and cultural aspects, are all pure nonsense when you overview it. None of it makes any rational sense in a higher vibrational culture. It's about as relevant as, is the earth flat or did we go to the moon? What difference does it make? It doesn't change your life. Either way. The real questions are, do I have the 5 essential basics of life? Yes or no? Food, water, clothing, home and energy. That determines the next stage of your life. With those 5, your next goal is the need to work on the self. Those without those 5 have a much harder life task and essentially cast adrift from life itself. Life is and never was about existing. It's about experiencing, learning, development and growth. and we need to relearn how to live, not just to exist. How can you live with the basic needs not met? You can't. And we have all allowed that to take place on this planet by adapting our own little life bubble. That what goes on elsewhere doesn't matter, as it's not affecting my or your life. That is the most stupid, naive thinking ever on this planet. And you're not as awake as you thought if that is your thinking. And you fail to grasp the fundamentals of the symbiotic nature of all living things. Many of us struggle with family members and partners not on the path of the awakened, and the following multi-layered awakening levels. And we feel an obligation to pacify or support them. But is it not often the case that it's the family who have rejected you? Where are their obligations? Why do we carry the burden and the guilt of their own stupidity and non-actions? My response to that is bollocks to it. But it's family in your blood, Thomas. Fair enough. But let's look at family and bloodlines in overview, shall we? And maybe something to ponder on and reconsider your thinking. One select group of people on this planet has for centuries ran everything based on bloodlines. For them, it's all about the blood group. They've all married and had sexual relations with their own family line, produced offspring that degraded them and their family heritage, plus all the bloodlines who subsequently seeded with them, all with the desire of power and control and the illusion of being more special than the rest. Oops. Incestuous relations abound. That was copied and spread into general society. That created a myriad of problems of malformities and disease via mismatched genetics. Has not bode well on this planet. The old saying, you can pick your friends, which is your sovereign choice, remember, but not your family. All about the family is copying bloodline elite traits, and that over time has not worked too well for them. Think about this for a second. We're talking about families and bloodlines. Why would a female human with the blood type Rh negative reject a human baby? The ultimate creation in life that requires an injection of poison so that the female will not reject the baby. Why would a mother reject her own child? The answer is, we're not all human. It is the simple and most logical answer, no matter how much that disturbs you or freaks you out. We're just not. We have all suffered via family, and many of us have tolerated them because they are family. But families, in essence, are not a sovereign choice, are they? Many of us got dumped into family lines, poisoned by their past deeds. You never chose to join that family, or your first and last name either. You were not born Christian, Jewish, Catholic, Buddhist, Protestant or Muslim. That was created for you. All of it. None of it was a sovereign choice. You were railroaded into it by your family, along with their ancestral misdeeds. Real family are amongst the stars, although some are here. It's based on frequency, not looks, titles, blood or wealth, but pure essence, frequency. Those that really understand that get it. Those that don't are not ready or not fully human. Timelines was mentioned last week. That will close out tonight's show. Timelines fixed does not mean you or we have won. Winning is not an end goal. Winning is doing the right things on a daily basis in accordance with cosmic and natural law under the Golden Rule principle. Developing the self is winning. Addressing your core issues of inner and shadow work is winning. Caring and sharing is winning. Service to others is winning. Being an example of change is winning. Overcoming fears is winning. Being yourself is winning. Making your voice heard is winning. And I would love to hear the Israeli people's voices sing loud and clear against those that oppress them. And no, it's not the white man, it's within your own circles. I want to hear your voices sing loud and clear. You are the voice. Use it. This has been the Truth, Honour and Integrity Show. My name's Thomas Williams. Bye for now.